With a new and fresh beta for the revision of the Runescape combat hitting us, there has been a lot, and I mean a lot, of discussion about stalling. It's become the buzzword of Gielinor, taking Reddit, Twitch, Discord servers, and even probably clan chats by storm. It's become the source of the division of the player base. It's become the very heart of PvM politics that we are now forced into due to this discussion. I'm here, as a fairly experienced and knowledgeable PvMer, to lay down my thoughts on why stalling is fundamentally a core mechanic in the game and has done no harm by itself. By the end of this video, you will not only understand what stalling is, but also why it exists and why it is a fundamental part of how RuneScape works. All of this will be in the context of how the live game currently is, and not cover anything on the beta, as that is not relevant to the discussion around why stalling is used the way that it is. So first, we need to go over what stalling actually is and what it means. There are many videos on YouTube talking about this exact subject, so I won't go into too much detail about it, as this would be stalling guide number 672. Rather, my aim with this section is to show at a mechanical level what stalling actually is, and not necessarily how to intentionally execute it. In RuneScape, the combat works off of an adrenaline bar, akin to many resources in other MMOs. Some abilities will generate adrenaline, like Smash, and some spend it, like Hurricane. If you press an ability outside of your current target range, so anything greater than 1 to 2 tiles for melee, 6 tiles for necromancy, 8 for magic, and 9 tiles for relevant range weapons, you will notice your adrenaline go down in accordance to what ability you used, as well as it go on cooldown. So if you use a threshold, it'll go down by 15%. If you use an ultimate, it'll go down by 80%, and you get the idea. This happens because you actually pressed the ability yourself and told the game, hey, I want to press Hurricane, and the game registered that input and charged you the 15% adrenaline ahead of time that it would cost in order to cast Hurricane. However, there's one issue. You're not in melee range. To account for this, as the game did actually charge you the adrenaline, as well as put it on cooldown, it queues up your input and pushes it to the next auto attack onto your target in order to compensate for you pressing it out of range so that you don't lose the ability cast. This makes it act as a functional failsafe, in order to prevent you from being able to press everything out of range and lose your adrenaline while having your abilities go on cooldown, all for nothing to happen. This can be a mechanic that you can intentionally use to your benefit if you know how it works, but also functions in the background only existing to help you. To illustrate this issue in game, I'm going to do a little bit of a quick demonstration. So, we can see that if I go over to this target dummy, I'll just start hitting it, right? Everything business as usual. And I can press abilities, and they go off just as they would normally happen. However, if I walk out of range, and then I press something like Hurricane, right, my character will walk in range and then use Hurricane. And if we instead press Hurricane and cancel the movement into melee range, you see that it still goes down and I still spent the adrenaline. But then whenever I walk into melee range, I will do a Hurricane. This can be used to your own benefit if you use it in the following case. I want to overpower, so I'm going to target the dummy, and I'm going to overpower. And then I'm going to walk up, and then release it and press Hurricane. And you see that I hit 4 times all at once. This is an example of in-combat stalling. And to take it one step further, I will also explain out-of-combat stalling. So if I want to get a crit buff with melee, I can use Incendiary Shot by going to this dummy, going to the Adrenaline Crystal, getting full adrenaline, going up to the dummy, and releasing it on said dummy, doing a Berserk, and then following it up with a normal melee rotation. So now with that, we're on the same page on the mechanical aspect of stalling. Let's talk about the use cases of intentional stalling, and what causes it to ruffle people's feathers. In order to understand this, we need to discuss the issues of melee and range, and why we are even having a combat beta in the first place. But to do this, we need to look at magic. Magic as a combat style is what I call self-sufficient, meaning it can play by itself and has everything it needs in order to function in-house by itself. Magic never feels the need to off-style Greater Ricochet or use an off-style crit buff. The root cause of this is Incite Fear. Incite Fear makes Tsunami cost 40% adrenaline instead of 100%, making it far more reasonable to build to after casting your Sunshine. This is important because crit buffs fuel your adrenaline gain heavily, and cause you to have a much better rotation, being able to do far more damage. With melee and range, you do not have this luxury. There is no reasonable or consistent way of getting a crit buff for those combat styles in order to use your ultimate without stalling or doing a style switch of some kind. This leads to people doing things like stalling Tsunami for range, or stalling Incendiary Shot or Meteor Strike for melee. These two styles depend on other styles in order to be able to function at the same level as magic and necromancy, which can function on their own without any external input. So why does this bother people? Simply put, there's too much pressure when ranging and meleeing to use these mechanics in order to make them function at even a basic level. Range without a crit buff cannot reliably use Death Spores to Incendiary Shot effectively, and melee without some sort of stall and or off-style Greco cannot reasonably use Meteor Strike, heavily gimping their damage, while magic gets to just use Tsunami as if it were nothing. This is the exact reason we have a combat beta in the first place, as I said before, and this is in order to fix these issues and to make primarily melee and range brought up to the standard we hold magic and necromancy to in terms of gameplay today. So assuming these things get appropriately addressed, what's wrong with stalling? There's a totally separate discussion going on as well at the same time as this about pre-building, and all of that I'm not really going to get into in this video, but to lay it out, I think people just feel bad that the difference between doing it and not doing it is currently so large with melee and range. Compared to magic, those two styles are virtually unplayable without stalling or switches, so it feels really bad to people who want to play those but feel they can't or no longer want to due to the pressure of feeling they need to do these things in order to keep up with magic and necromancy. Obviously, you can melee camp and get kills at any boss just fine without doing any of this, but that doesn't mean it feels good for it to be the case. But to ask the question about the elephant in the room, is it the fault of stalling, or the fault of the combat style design? I firmly believe at its core, the current live combat style design has been band-aided by stalling for a while, propping melee and range up to keep them relevant in the era of magic and necromancy. Melee and range are both powerful in their own ways and in their own rights, but without stalling or off-style switches, they lose their light in the context of mid to high in PvM, and it isn't fair to blame stalling for the issues that plague the combat style design. On the current beta, there's no real reason or need to stall in order to play a single combat style by itself. Is this a mechanic that should be more properly explained or showcased to you in-game? That I can get behind and would tend to agree with, but saying it is a root problem of combat in RuneScape is an extremely out-of-touch perception. It is a mechanic that fundamentally exists only to benefit you in the background, that you can just so happen to take advantage of and use intentionally provided you know when and how. It does nothing but help you in your day-to-day gameplay, even as a casual player, and for those who still stand in the anti-stalling camp, but are interested in high-level PvM, or even mid-level PvM, and the stalling turns you off of it, I encourage you to go play, test, and provide your own feedback and perceptions on the current combat beta instead of just saying, remove stalling. Saying just remove stalling does nothing to either identify or fix the issue of why it is the way it is and why we are where we are now. The current goal of the upcoming combat updates is to remove the pressure and need to stall in order to do moderate level PvM, specifically with melee and range. This doesn't have to mean getting rid of a mechanic in order to do it. Hopefully now you see stalling less like the monster under the bed, and more like a friendly ghost trying to help you out every once in a while.